ranking season, whether it be in December with the end of year rankings or in July with the summer top 50, is always an exciting time for anyone who is a fan of the statistical side of Melee. This year's summer ranking is especially interesting because of how hard it can be to rank some portions of the list, like 2 to 3, 6 to 10, and 12 to 20. With this video, I'm going to give you my personal opinion on what my 12 to 20 looks like, while also giving you the stats for the most likely players to fill up this spot on your ballot, so that you can put together your own 12 to 20. And I've already covered a lot of the portions of the ballot in my previous videos, so if you want to hear me talk about why Hungrybox is still number 1, who should be number 2 between Plup and Armada, and who should be ranked 7 to 11, click on the playlist in the top right corner, which should also include the VODs of my streams ranking this portion of the list. But without further ado, let's talk about the biggest contenders for the 12th spot: S2J, Crush, and Lucky. And to clarify all of these charts moving forward, locals are not included on these charts. And if you want an explanation for why, that could be a whole nother video in itself. So I think the biggest thing we see here is that the unofficial theme of this year's summer rank is that everyone has bad losses. All 3 of these players have nearly the same level of losses, so then it comes down to who has put up the better wins, which I think is a title that clearly goes to Lucky. He's the only player on this portion of the list with a win over a top 6 player, as well as having an even head-to-head for the year against Zane. So with all of this in mind, he's my pick for number 12. So with Lucky ranked, let's bring Hugs into the mix, who actually has had a fantastic first half of the year that has left him with an even head-to-head with Zane and a winning record on Amza. But S2J's record shows him as the more consistent player out of these 3, and therefore the player most likely to place the best at the hypothetical tournaments that the ballot is asking for, which puts him at the 13th spot for me. After bringing in West Balls to replace him, we have a placing that I thought was a joke when someone suggested it on stream, which is Hugs at 14th over Crush. Hugs' depth of loss is shown to be a less consistent player than Crush, but as previously stated, having an even record with Zane that includes a 3-0 at EGLX and a winning record against Amza, both players who are clearly in the top 10 right now, is so valuable in my eyes that he deserves this spot. And before we rank number 15, let's take a brief detour and talk about ranking philosophy to break up the monotony. In my eyes, the biggest debate that exists when ranking Melee players is what matters more, consistency or peaks. But it doesn't boil down to just about her being a consistency person or a peaks person. It's more about how much consistency outweighs a certain level of peaks and vice versa. An example of this you've already seen is me putting Lucky over S2J, because if we were going solely by consistency, S2J deserves to be above him. But Lucky is consistent enough while also having great wins with his resume that it outweighs S2J's in my eyes. So with that in mind, let's move back into comparing West Balls, Swedish, and Crush for the 15th spot. For me, West Balls takes the 15th spot away from Crush because despite of all the memeing about his bad losses, he has better losses than most people on this list, while also having some of the best wins because of his SSS run. I am a bit concerned about him moving forward with his losses to Ralph and Caesar at the bigger Balk, but luckily for him, those aren't considered for the ballot. And here at 16th is where Crush finally takes his place. He doesn't have as good of wins as both Swedish or None, but is much more consistent than Swedish, and arguably slightly more consistent than None. The deletion of his Twitter and his quiet dropping out of CEO shrouds the second half of his 2018 in a bit of mystery, but even if he didn't enter a single event for the rest of the year, I think he'd make the top 20 for most people's end of year ballots. Then bringing in Pew Pew for our next discussion, we have a classic consistency versus peaks debate. Swedish easily has the best list of wins, but his litany of losses in the 25 to 50 section pushes me to put Pew Pew at 17th, because he's not only consistent, but he's able to boast wins over SFAT, Crush, and Zane as well. These lack of losses may be due to a low attendance, but I still think it's fair to give Pew Pew this spot. And with this, we have our final 3 players in the top 20 who end up being ordered in the exact way they are placed on the graphic. None's consistency and not his high peaks has fallen short on the last couple of comparisons, but now he trumps over Swedish and Absent Page, both who have losses that nearly overflow the graphic in the 21 to 50 column. And although Swedish's and Absent Page's results look quite similar at first glance, Absent Page has had worse losses as he has skyrocketed up the rankings throughout the year, which puts Swedish at 19th and Absent Page at 20th. Just to recap, here's the list of my entire top 20 as of right now, with the distances between each player included. I've done tons of videos on ranking players before, and I have to admit, this is the hardest time I've ever had placing players. Just to show you what I mean by this, here's my top 20 at the end of my first stream, here it is at the end of my second stream, and here's what it actually ended up looking like by the end of this video. And I think all, or even none of these lists could be argued as being correct, depending on what you personally value, which I think makes this ranking period so awesome. If I had to take a shot at what I think the final 11 to 20 list would look like, I'd say it'd be something more like this. Again, if you want to check out any of my other videos in this ranking series, click on the playlist at the end of this video that also includes the VODs of those previously mentioned ranking streams. I still have not covered the arguments of who should be ranked 4 to 6, so if that's something you'd be interested to see, tell me down in the comments. I also will be finishing the rest of my ballot on stream, so follow me over on Twitch and Twitter to get notifications when I go live, both of which are linked down in the description. I'm very excited and slightly scared to see what you guys think about my list in the comments. And just as kind of a general note, I don't often respond to as many comments as I wish I could, but I do read pretty much every single one, so I am listening to what you guys are saying. And that about wraps it up. I've been SaveAsUntitled, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.